أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم ففهمنا سليمان وكلنا آتينا حكما وعلما رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم سبحانك اللهم وحنانيك ألم لا تنسني ولا تنسني الحمد لله أفضل الحمد اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آله وسائر النبيين والصالحين وسلم علم وفقني واهدني وسددني واجمع لي بين الصواب والثواب وعذني من الخطأ والهرمان آمين. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome to another episode of Questions and Answers. I'm sure by now you know the format. I'm sure by now you know what to expect. But just to remind, and also maybe for any new viewers that have just joined, the format is pretty straightforward, to be honest. You ring in with your questions and you need to know the number. The number to ring is 01274 214 299. That's 01274 214 299. You call in, you ask your question, quote your observation, something that's occupied your mind, something you're thinking about, some kind of suggestion for discussion. And then, inshallah ta'ala, I try to give whatever knowledge I've learned from books and my teachers that I can then share with you, inshallah. That's the plan. In the meantime, whilst I wait for the calls, and I do also urge people who are going to call in that they call in early, because as you know, we have like two slots, approximately 20 minutes long each, and it quickly gets eaten into. And if you call and then pose the question and there's some kind of deliberation and then a response, it could easily mean that a whole segment goes just by one call. So get your call in early. In the meantime, whilst we're waiting for the calls, as you also know, I have a forum upon which questions are asked. This is on the Telegram app, in which questions are asked and I respond to those questions. So what I will do in the meantime is I will, whilst I'm waiting for the calls to come in, is deal with some of the questions that I've already received. Okay, so let's go with question number one. This is quite a long question. So, Jazakallah for your reply to my previous message. Can I also ask a question regarding oud? I was gifted an oud from Center Salim. That's how she spelt it. I believe they have shops in lots of different towns and cities. I contacted them online asking if free from animal ingredients. The reply I received said all their ouds do not contain any animal ingredients. In the time I was waiting for a reply, I happened to find a video on YouTube of who I believe is the owner, showing a gentleman some of his ouds and giving information about them. And he happened to mention that one particular oud had an ingredient from a whale or dolphin, I can't remember now. And the gentleman saying something on the lines of, so you don't know which end of the dolphin where this ingredient is from. So when I received the reply saying nothing has animal ingredients, I then got back in touch mentioning the YouTube video and what had been. Unfortunately, after that message, I didn't receive any reply back. I'm a little confused. Am I missing something and reading all this wrong? Or maybe there was an error in the video, or if the reply I got is not true. If what they have said to me is untrue, then I'm a little worried, as a lot of Muslims purchase ouds from this particular company. In fact, it is always packed out. Would it be possible for you to tell me what steps I can take now, as I feel bad throwing this oud away, as it was a gift from my son and he wants me to use it? Okay, so let's reply to this. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Dear sister, when there's anything that is made from fish ingredients, i.e. that's something which has been extracted from fish, drawn from fish, then we don't slaughter fish. And also the oud or the scent which is being taken from the animal, usually is the sort of from the whale, if I remember correctly. And I think it's actually whale vomit, surprisingly, which is used, and it has a certain smell, a certain scent. In that regard, that is permissible to use. There is no problem, and you are more than content to carry on using that with no concern whatsoever. So sometimes we have to be a little bit careful when we use the word animal, and we then sort of obviously think of four-legged creatures and things of that nature. A fish, technically, it doesn't come under the phrase animal anyway. It's not considered as an animal. And also, obviously, this fish is not killed before its deposits, its produce is taken for use. Let's look at the next question. Assalamu alaikum, respected Mufti Sahib. Is 952 sterling silver jewelry permissible for women to wear? Is it considered real silver? As I heard, women are only allowed to wear real gold or silver jewelry, especially rings. Okay, so let's reply back to this. Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, dear sister. 952 sterling silver jewelry is 95.2% silver. That's where the 952 comes from, because it's 952 parts out of 1,000. So for those of you who have some maths inclination, you will know quite quickly that that's 95.2%, which means in real terms it's absolute silver. The alloy that's mixed into that silver is just to strengthen it, because it will be too malleable, it'll be too bendy when you use it for jewelry purposes. So yes, a woman is permitted to wear silver that is 952 sterling silver. There's no harm in that whatsoever. Let's move on to the next question. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, Mufti Sahab. I'm currently in Istanbul and the Qibla is 151 degrees. But because I used to pray at 120 degrees back home in France, I kept praying at 120 degrees here in Istanbul too. Do I have to do qadha for all the prayers I did? Now, when we look at the requirement for us when we're praying in a particular direction is to pray towards the Kaaba, not pray to the Kaaba. Now, you might be thinking that, am I playing with words here? I'm not. Praying to the Kaaba is very different than praying towards the Kaaba. If you can sight the Kaaba, or the Kaaba is close to you, like you are praying in the Masjid al-Haram in Mecca, and you're not praying in the Mataf area where people make tawaf, you're praying behind. But you know categorically that that's where the Kaaba is, because you've just walked out the masjid, for instance, or you know which gate you've gone in through. So you know that the Kaaba is roughly situated there. Then you're obviously required to pray to the Kaaba. Whereas if you're living in Bradford, if you're living in France somewhere, if you're living in Istanbul, then we pray in the approximate direction of the Kaaba. Why? Because the Sharia is not going to stipulate something upon you which is beyond your ability. To try to determine exactly where the Kaaba is going to be quite difficult, right down to the last degree or even the last minute, which is a subsection of the degree. That's going to be too hard. And the Sharia doesn't want to burden you beyond your capacity. So it will say pray within its area. So the fuqaha say, the ulama say, that as long as you are praying and there's sort of 90 degrees, so you're praying in this direction, so you've got 45 degrees that way and 45 degrees that way, then that will be considered as valid. Okay, so what I'm saying is if you have a circle, okay, and you split it in half, and you split it in half again, then each angle is 90 degrees, because we know the angle around a circle is 360 degrees. Okay, so if it's 360 degrees, and 360 degrees divided by 2 to make it half is 180 degrees. And to divide 180 degrees by half again is 90 degrees. So as long as we are within that 90 degrees, i.e. 45 degrees that way of the Kaaba, 45 degrees that way of the Kaaba, then the Salah is valid. Now when you look at 120 and 150, i.e. that the lady should have prayed towards 150, and instead she prayed towards 120, then if you add 45 degrees to 150, it becomes 195. And if you subtract 45 degrees from 150, it becomes 105. So as long as she prayed between 105 and prayed between 195, then her salah is valid. So that's the response I gave to her early this morning when she contacted me. So that's something to bear in mind. Now let me explain a little bit about Qibla, because people get a little bit confused when, for instance, non-Muslims say to Muslims, why do you pray towards the Kaaba? Why do you circumambulate around the Kaaba? The Kaaba is a building. It's made out of stone. And because the pagans, those who were idol worshippers before Islam, in the time of Jahiliyyah, also prayed towards the Kaaba. And they also made circumambulation, tawaf, around the Kaaba. And they also had respect for the various sites around the Masjid al-Haram. Then there was some level of confusion particularly with the non-Muslims, very early on, there's still some confusion now, that they did not see any difference between the pagan idol worship religion of the Arabs and Islam. So why do we pray towards the Kaaba? The Kaaba, in essence, is for no other reason but for uniformity. That's the only reason. You'll notice in the Sharia, even when it comes to acts of worship, there is always uniformity amongst the believers. Whether it be their dress code, whether it be their attire, you know, for like the length of a man's hair, the length of a man's beard, okay, like the way, for example, the female attire, there is a level of uniformity. And this is the identity of a Muslim. You will see that across this level of uniformity that occurs, and where certain things are made illegal. Similarly, for this level of uniformity, for instance, when you go into a synagogue or when you go into a church, there is no real element of congregational prayer. There is, for example, like the khutbah that we have in Islam, where the Imam Sahib will recite and the other people listen. There is that element, but there is nothing similar to the fact that the Imam is also turning his back to the people and he is also praying to Allah. So we have the khutbah where Imam Sahib faces the congregation. We have in Christianity, we have the priest turning towards his congregation. And also we have the rabbi turning towards his congregation. The only place where we see congregational prayer, where everybody is in uniform, everybody is praying together, is in Islam. And even the Imam is not above that. Yani, he also has to turn and pray. It's not that he is some higher rank above the believers and he does not need to pray. He needs to pray as much as the next man. And in fact, we see the mihrab in front of the Imam Sahib, the kind of enclave that you find in front of the masjid. And the reason for the enclave is for the voice to be reflected back to the people behind. Hence you see it as a concave. I think I got it right, right? Convex is where it sticks out, concave where it goes in. I remember it from the vex and the cave. If I'm wrong, call me, correct me, I'm fine. I can deal with that. So that back in the day when we didn't have all microphones and we didn't have amplifiers and we didn't have speakers, that when a person spoke, the voice would then echo back to the people behind. Because obviously when you're giving khutbah, you're facing the people. But when you're praying, you've got your back to the people. So how are they going to hear your recitation? How are they going to hear your takbirat? So this is how it is set. But he is not allowed to step foot into the mihrab, because if he steps foot into the mihrab, it gives him a higher station than those behind. Similarly, he cannot pray on a raised platform. Even though the Imam Sahib, when he delivers a khutbah, he will deliver the khutbah from a mimbar, which is raised so that people can see him, because he's addressing them, he's advising them, he's encouraging them, he's motivating them, he's potentially disciplining them. That's his role. But when he's praying, he's doing an act of worship, and he is as much need of the act of worship as everybody else behind. So we see this uniformity. Allahu Akbar, everybody raises their hands, everybody ties their hands under the navel, assuming they're Hanafi. And then everybody's there stood, we got that shoulder to shoulder, leaving no gaps in between. Then he says, Allahu Akbar, everybody goes into ruku. When you look from a bird's eye view in the haram, you see these nice circles of, like, onion rings of believers praying. And it looks phenomenal. It looks like complete submission of the people to Allah. When everybody's in, when it's sajda time for the Imam, everybody is in sajda. When it is prostration time, bowing time rather, everybody is in bowing. So there's that level of uniformity which gives something, with regards to Islam, something remarkable. Because you can get, I don't know the number, but you can get, several 100,000 people, if not, in the million, people praying in Masjid al-Haram at the same time. So can you imagine that uniformity? And that's what it's there for. Okay, so we have that uniformity. Let's look at the others that have come in. Okay, that was that done. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. When my husband's aunt from America is right now here in Germany and would like to visit us at our home here with his female cousin, who is also my husband's age. She doesn't wear the hijab, would maybe talk to him, would also laugh in the same room, etc. How is that from an Islamic point of view? Should we say something about the visit, for example, that they shouldn't come with the female cousin, or at least talk to the aunt, and that we want to sit down here at our home in separate rooms and all together? If they don't say anything against sitting in separate rooms, but maybe the aunt or cousin is a little offended, we should still sit in our own home down separate, right? So in this regard, the answer will certainly remain the same as your answer you gave me about the other questions about us visiting the aunt from America and the female cousin in Germany at his grandmother's home, so that we should do our best not to sit in all the rooms, so at our home also. So if we should still invite them to our home anyway, and shouldn't say that the cousin shouldn't come to our home with them, for example. Okay. So that's quite a fair bit there in there. So let's respond back to this. Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Yes, sister, and as I've already explained to you, because this sister has been in touch with me quite regularly, as I've already explained to you, you do it wherever you can, whatever situation you can do with as best as possible, with causing as little offense as possible. You're not here to cause offense, because the reason why we say not to cause offense, because not everybody is fully au fait with the religious rules. And if you say in a very abrupt manner, if you say it in a very kind of, as a matter of fact manner, people just won't understand that. So there needs to be an element of education, there needs to be an element of nurturing, and there needs to be an element of development so that people understand that, okay, this is the way we do things. So I hope that makes some sense. Anyway, in response to that, that deals with most of the questions on the sisters group. We are now coming close to our interval. However, we have a caller waiting. So, dear caller, please put your question in as concise way as possible, because we're only a few minutes away from the break.
Okay. Assalamu alaikum, brother.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, my dear sister. How are you?
Alhamdulillah. I am just asking, if can you tell me something to pray for children? Sometimes children are very hyper. They are going to be the Islamic school, everything, but sometimes is hyper and not listening. And can you tell us I am praying some dua or some zikr?
Absolutely.
Also, they are going to be by the deen, everybody, is small, big, everybody going to be really to the Islam.
Okay, mashallah. Jazakumullah khair, sister, for your question. So just to, on that point where the sister's mentioning that, obviously she's mentioned that the tarbiyah is already there, they're going to an Islamic school, so there's some effort going in, but the children can be a little bit rowdy, can be a little bit, naughty, can be, and not only that, she's saying, not just for the young ones, but also, for those that start getting older. Bear in mind, Islamic school, madrasa, Darul Uloom, all these sorts of things, they are there as a means to try to achieve your goal. They are not just the only solution. Sometimes we think we just need one answer to a question. Children growing up, complicated, because somewhere along the lines, they're going to have their own impulses, they're going to be exposed to things, so you've got to try to always manage it. With children, I always say, there's got to be an element of discipline at a young age, but there's also got to be a level of friendship as they start to get older. They've got to trust you. They've got to be well connected to you. They've got to, feel you. And, bear in mind, children will mess about, Naturally, I sit here in front of you and, my mother's not here, but, she would sit here and tell you that this guy here, he sits here now, but he was a pretty naughty boy. It's natural, it's fitrat. We're curious, we don't know boundaries, we don't know rules, and we, mess about, unfortunately. But keep patient, keep the tarbiyah going, and, just continue to be, somebody who's talking to them. Communication for me is absolutely essential. Keep talking to them. And when you're telling them about something, sit them down and explain it, that, why this is a problem. Now, I appreciate they may go do that thing in the next 5 minutes. But as you constantly do that, constantly sit your children down, explain it to them, they will start to slowly get an understanding. Then inshallah ta'ala, as they get older, then you will see the khidmat that they will do once they reach maturity. And remember, they also talk about, for example, teenage children or teenagers, that their minds aren't fully developed. And I can vouch for that. And they'll do things, their decision making is very poor. And they will make poor decisions. So have that expectation. Don't think that you're going to get angels almost immediately just because, he's becoming a hafiz of Quran or she is becoming an alima. That doesn't bring angelic characteristics. Those are just skills that they're learning. Those are just things that they're picking up. When it comes to decision making, they will still have a child's mind, they will still have a teenager's mind, and they'll make errors. But the fact that you're giving tarbiyah, the fact that you're putting them in these kind of environments, that will bode well for them. I met one of my students who's now, 25 years old, 26 years old, and he's still, and I haven't seen him since he left our institute when he was 16. And he still remembers those traits and qualities that we instilled in him 10 years later. Now, it might be that, he messed about at school. In fact, this person didn't. He might have messed about at madrasa and, he might have made some silly decisions. But eventually, that person then understands what needs to get done. So, I hope that has been somewhat explanatory in what needs to get done. Keep that up. Keep, making your salah. Stick to that. Keep your advice going. Even now, my mother's advice echoes in my ears, and I'm, much, much older, and it will still stay with me, and I'm sure your mother's advice does as well. So we're going to take a short break. Please join me again shortly for some more questions and answers. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.